Okay, so now we've talked about the Missouri Compromise. Now we're going to look at a little bit the election of 1824. We're going to see that we have multiple candidates running, but basically at this point we really only have one party, and this is what we had talked about before with the era of good feelings. So this is eventually going to fall apart. But with the election of 1824, with so many candidates running for office, it's going to be very, very difficult for one of those candidates to actually win a majority of the electoral votes. And that's what you have to obtain in order to become the president. Andrew Jackson will actually win the popular vote, he wins the most popular votes, and he wins the most electoral votes, but no candidate at this point actually wins a majority of the electoral votes. So basically you have to get more than half of the electoral votes and able to be president. If not, it's going to go to a runoff system. As we mentioned before, there's multiple candidates here, so we're going to see how this kind of all falls apart because of one candidate not getting a majority, not most, majority of the electoral votes. So as you can see with the system here, Andrew Jackson gets 99 of the electoral votes, which is 38%. He gets 153,000 popular votes, which is 43% of the popular vote. And if you look at where Andrew Jackson is kind of pulling most of his pull at this time, you can see politically, hold for 1 second, most of his votes are coming in the West and in the South, and in kind of that old Northwest that we had talked about up in this region of Indiana and Illinois, but a lot of it coming from the Deep South and expanding westward into places like Louisiana and so forth. So on the other hand, we have Adams, who gets 84 electoral votes and 108,000 the popular votes, so he gets 31% of the votes. Crawford, hailing from Georgia, as he wins his home state of Georgia with 9 electoral votes there, gets 41 total, but only gets 13% of the popular vote. And Henry Clay, as I mentioned before, keeps running for the presidency, only gets 37 electoral votes and 13% as well on the popular vote. So you would think at this point, obviously, just looking at the chart here, that Andrew Jackson looks like he's obviously popular in the South and going into the West, and nationally looks pretty popular as a candidate, but he doesn't win the majority of electoral votes. So as I mentioned before, it goes to a runoff. And you can see here is an example of the tally sheet from what state they're coming from. Up here listed are the states, and here are the casting of their ballots and their votes and so forth. And each candidate will show how many they possibly got as a result of that. And so up here you can see the president, and then you got the vice presidency, the positions there, and how this all kind of unfolds. Well, it ends up that the vote is going to go to the House of Representatives, much like it did in the election of 1800 when there was a tie between Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr. So the top 3 candidates are going to go in a runoff. Well, it just so happens at this point that Henry Clay, who is no longer in the race because he's not one of the top 3 contenders, is going to be the Speaker of the House. And the Speaker of the House is a very important position in the House of Representatives. He's basically the President of the House of Representatives. He gives all of his support for John Quincy Adams. So John Quincy Adams wins the support of the House, and it seems odd that Henry Clay becomes the Secretary of State. And as we've mentioned before, the Secretary of State, which is a large role in diplomacy, is the representative for our country abroad. He is oftentimes seen as a stepping stone or a person towards the path of becoming the president. So it just seems kind of ironic that John Quincy Adams becomes the president, although he never won the majority of the votes, nor the most votes in either popular or electoral college, but gets chosen as the president based on the support of the House of Representatives, where Henry Clay has a lot of authority. And this whole incident, the election of 1824, is oftentimes called the corrupt bargain. Because Jackson believes that there was a bargain done, basically allowing John Quincy Adams to become president as long as John Quincy Adams appoints Henry Clay to become the Secretary of State. So in exchange for his delivery of key votes in the House, is this true? Possibly it is. It's politics. We have no proof, but charges stuck to it, and President Adams is going to lose later on in 1828 for the fact that he basically seems like he stole the presidency by gaining support of one individual to motivate the House of Representatives to vote a certain way. So as you can see this, corrupt bargain, 1824, Andrew Jackson has the most votes, but he doesn't have the majority, and it ends up going to the House of Representatives with the top 3 candidates, and eventually we'll see Henry Clay throw his support perhaps for John Quincy Adams, and he becomes the next president. Thank you very much.